Today, the president's longest-serving political advisor was sentenced to more than 3 years in federal prison for his role in 2016 in trying to connect Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign with the entity that was releasing the materials that the Russian military had that Russian military intelligence had hacked and stolen to help Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Well, we just, moments before we got on the air, just got the transcript of the proceedings in which Roger Stone was sentenced today. And you really should hear this. There are no cameras in federal courts. In some federal courts, including the Supreme Court, there are sometimes audio recordings that are made of court proceedings and then released to the public, but usually not. Usually, and for today's proceedings, the only record that we're allowed to get is written transcript like this, but we do have this. And in a case like today's, with this Roger Stone sentencing, this is really something. Let me read to you a little bit from what the judge said at today's sentencing. The judge, quote, "The defendant lied about a matter of great national and international significance. This is not campaign hijinks. This is not Roger just being Roger. He lied to Congress. He lied to our elected representatives. The sentence is not just about punishing him, but also about deterring others and upholding the law. It has to send the message that witnesses do not get to decide for themselves whether Congress is entitled to the facts based on what they think about the topic being investigated or who they fear could be embarrassed by the topic being investigated." The judge says, quote, "There was nothing unfair, phony, or disgraceful about the investigation or the prosecution. The House committee, which Stone lied to, which at the time Stone testified was under the control of the Republican majority, the Senate Intelligence Committee, which remains under the control of the Republican majority, the special counsel who was appointed by and serving under the supervision of the acting attorney general of this administration, and the current inspector general of the current Department of Justice, all investigated the circumstances surrounding the 2016 election. And all have concluded, like the multiple agencies charged with protecting the United States' national security, that the fact that there was a Russian attempt to interfere in the election was beyond debate. It's a matter of enormous public concern. And therefore, the House committee," the judge says, "the House committee had legitimate grounds, indeed a duty, to inquire how materials belonging to the Democratic National Committee ended up in the hands of WikiLeaks and whether Russia played any role in that. The committee had legitimate grounds, indeed a duty, to inquire whether there was any involvement, encouragement, collaboration on the part of the Trump campaign. The legitimacy of the inquiry is an entirely separate question from whether anyone found enough evidence to draw a conclusion at the end of the day." Roger Stone, the defendant, took it upon himself to lie, to impede, to obstruct before the investigation was complete. And he endeavored to influence the result. How could the committee do its job and reach the correct conclusion under those circumstances? So what did the defense say to the jury on his behalf? They said, "So what? So what? Of all the circumstances in this case, that may be the most pernicious." The judge says, quote, "The truth still exists. The truth still matters. Roger Stone's insistence that it doesn't, his belligerence, his pride in his own lies, are a threat to our most fundamental institutions, to the very foundation of our democracy. And if it goes unpunished, it will not be a victory for one party or another. Everyone loses, because everyone depends on the representatives they elect to make the right decisions on a myriad of issues, many of which are politically charged, but many of which aren't. And they must make those decisions based on the facts. Everyone depends on our elected representatives to protect our elections from foreign interference based on the facts. No one knows where the threat is going to come from next time or whose side they're going to be on. And for that reason, the dismay and disgust at the defendant's belligerence should transcend party. The dismay and the disgust at the attempts by others to defend his actions as just business as usual in our polarized climate should transcend party. The dismay and the disgust with any attempts to interfere with the efforts of prosecutors and members of the judiciary to fulfill their duty should transcend party. Sure, the defense is free to say, "So what? Who cares?" But I'll say this: Congress cared. The United States Department of Justice and the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia that prosecuted this case and is still prosecuting this case cared. The jurors who served with integrity under difficult circumstances cared. The American people cared. And I care. Says Amy Berman Jackson, the judge sentencing the president's longtime advisor, Roger Stone, in a climate that can't be denied and that she didn't deny today, in a climate in which the president and much of the Trump-supportive conservative media and many Republican members of Congress have participated in, have created this climate in which not only Roger Stone has been defended and the prosecution of him has been attacked, but the judge has been attacked, the Department of Justice has been attacked for bringing this prosecution, and the president has gone so far as to personally attack individual members of the jury for having had the temerity to convict Roger Stone. Those were remarks today from Judge Jackson today in sentencing Stone for lying to Congress, obstructing an investigation, and threatening a witness who could have exposed his lies and obstruction. This case, of course, also engendered a true crisis in the U.S. justice system, when more than 2,000 former Justice Department officials have called on Attorney General Bill Barr to resign after the president criticized prosecutors for the sentence they recommended in Roger Stone's case, and Attorney General Barr, within hours of that public criticism, intervened at the U.S. Attorney's Office to lessen that recommendation. The resulting scandal has led to reporting on a number of other cases related to President Trump, in which we now know Attorney General Bill Barr has intervened personally to try to swing things in the president's direction. Well, today in court, Judge Jackson took that on. Took on that late swerve in this case, took it on directly, including the part of this that is lying there in full sight but has received, I think, less attention in this crisis than it deserves, which is that as the president has demanded interference in this case, and the attorney general has said, yes, sir, you want me to jump how high? As the president has demanded interference in this case and the attorney general has followed through on that, it has sort of gone without much mention that it's not just the president's friend here who's getting this intervention. This is a case where the president is intervening to help himself. Because the person who benefited from what Roger Stone did, the person who Roger Stone's crimes were designed to protect, was the president. So when the president is trying to intervene in Stone's case to make sure he doesn't get in trouble, he is trying to reward someone and protect someone who broke the law and committed multiple felonies in order to help cover up the president's behavior. Judge Jackson addressed that head-on today. Quote, Stone revealed his own motivation to shield the president from evidence that could reflect badly on him. On December 1st, 2017, Stone testified that he texted to Randy Credico, if you testify, you're a fool. Because of Trump, I could never get away with asserting my Fifth Amendment rights, but you can. Stone knew that some would view it as incriminating for both him and the Trump campaign if he asserted his right to testify and say nothing. So he lied instead, and then he tried to make sure that his lie was not exposed. He understood full well that it could reflect badly on the president if someone learned that he had exchanged emails about what Julian Assange at WikiLeaks was about to do, or that he'd sent messages trying to get Julian Assange to release emails on a particular topic, on a particular schedule, or that there were emails between himself and Steve Bannon and Rick Gates and Paul Manafort as he reported in on all of this to the Trump campaign. Stone's effort to obstruct the investigation was deliberate and planned. It was not one isolated incident. It was conducted over a considerable period of time. Stone lied and sought to impede production of information to whom? Not to some secret anti-Trump cabal, but to Congress, to the elected representatives of both parties who were confronted with a matter of grave national importance. He was not convicted and is not being sentenced for exercising his First Amendment rights or for his support of the president's campaign or his policies. Stone was not prosecuted, as some have complained, for standing up for the president. He was prosecuted for covering up for the president. Quote, this case also exemplifies why it is that this system, for good reason, demands that the responsibility falls to someone neutral, someone whose job may involve issuing opinions in favor of and against the same administration in the course of a week, and not someone who has a long-standing friendship with the defendant, not someone whose political career was aided by the defendant, and surely not someone who has personal involvement in the events underlying the case. The court cannot be influenced by those comments. She's referring here to the president's comments. The court cannot be influenced by those comments. They were entirely inappropriate, but I will not hold them against the defendant either. The judge says, quote, I cannot and will not sentence Mr. Stone for the behavior of those he supports. Sentencing is personal, and it is based on the evidence. Roger Stone will not be sentenced for who his friends are or for who his enemies are. He is not going to be sentenced for his reputation or his personality or his work. The record doesn't begin to enable me to figure out which supposed dirty tricks he actually committed and which he just took credit for. And it doesn't matter. The touchstone in this case is the offense. With what the judge described today as unprecedented situation in which the president demanded intervention in this case to protect Roger Stone, and the attorney general within hours followed through and threw out the prosecutor's sentencing recommendation and insisted instead on the lighter sentencing recommendation that the president had insisted on. With the trial team, all the prosecutors on the trial team quitting in protest, including one quitting the government altogether. The judge described that today as an unprecedented thing, but did not hide from the fact that this wasn't just about Attorney General William Barr wading into the case. It was the president trying to intervene in this sentencing. The judge today holding the line and saying that it was wildly inappropriate for the president to do that. It is right in our system of justice that somebody involved in the underlying matter of this case, the president, should not be involved in sentencing the person who was convicted for those crimes. But the judge also saying, but you know what, Mr. Stone, you will not be held to account. Your sentence will not be made worse because of the wildly inappropriate behavior of the president who's acting on your behalf. Instead, I will consider you and your fate purely on the basis of the crimes you have committed. In other words, return to regular order while not pretending that anything that has happened here is okay. The behavior of the Attorney General, the behavior of the president. Wildly inappropriate, but this judge will do things the way they are supposed to be done within the four corners of the law and in a transparent manner, without fear or favor. Remarkable allocution today from the judge. But I think the real surprise here is that the trial team all quit, right? The four prosecutors who are working on this case all quit the case because of what the president and the Attorney General did to pervert this case and to try to take it away from the prosecutors who were bringing it up. The U.S. Attorney's Office, nevertheless, had to put somebody up in court today in front of this judge to explain what's going on. And the shock to me in this sentencing today, and it's kind of a pleasant surprise in terms of the crisis that we have been through over the last week, is that the person who stood up from the U.S. Attorney's Office today completely abandoned that intervention. Completely abandoned this intervention that the president demanded that Attorney General Bill Barr had made in this case. The gentleman who stood up from the U.S. Attorney's Office today, who had to explain to the judge what happened here, apologized for it and absolutely rejected and rebutted everything the president and Bill Barr did. That's next.